All right, so we're going to take a look at this GB News segment, putting the British people first. Let's see what we got going on here.
Is a final negotiation with Iran actually on the table, or is the West facing an inevitable conflict? Former Deputy Special Presidential Envoy to the Middle East, Morgan Ortagus, says the US won't be dragged along by Tehran any longer. She joins Beverly Turner to discuss the nuclear threat, the safety of global trade routes, and why the White House is prepared to act alone if necessary.
Realistically, how far away are we now from a negotiation being finalised in Iran?
It's hard to predict what a finalized negotiation will be, but my understanding from the White House is that the negotiations remain ongoing. This is actually a pattern.
Let me be clear. In regards to Trump, I don't think he really cares if the actual regime or group of people get replaced. I think he cares that he can finally either kill enough of them or come to some kind of agreement to where they will work with him and the rest of the world. I think that's his goal. I don't think it's nation building or trying to actually get every single one of the regime out. I think he's just looking for someone that is going to develop normal relationships with the rest of the world, especially the United States. I think that's what he wants.
And I think of President Trump, both in his first term and in his second term. In any situation, he's always going to extend the hand of diplomacy.
I mean, take Venezuela, for example. We went in, we got Maduro, got out, Kelsey Rodriguez took over, and we have a relationship. We didn't get rid of the regime, we just got someone who would work with us and form normal relations with us again. I think that's what he wants.
He's always going to try to find a peaceful resolution. But unlike past presidents, he will show that he's willing to use American military might and American force if they can't get a deal at the negotiating table. So that's why you saw in the first year of the Trump administration, when I was still in as an active official, the president put a clear time constraint on the Iranian negotiations. The first ones we had.
I also think this is also due to Trump wanting more oil and gas exports out of the United States, especially now that we're a major exporter. I mean, that benefits us. Yeah, right now it's making things cost a lot more, whether that's food or gas or other things. It's going to hit us, but it's not going to hit us as hard as the rest of the world, and in a way, it benefits us. I think another motive might be, well, he's been trying to end the Ukraine war for over a year now, year and a half, however long it's been since he's been in office, and no progress is made. Well, what's a way of benefiting the idea of ending the Ukraine war? Well, you take out a major supplier of oil in order to benefit another major supplier of oil, that being Russia. And what that does is it weakens the Ukrainian side of the war, and it gives a lot more strength and money and power to the Russian side. I think Trump is over this. I also think it's the other after effect it has is the weapons and the supplies that the Europeans have been buying and given to Ukraine. Well, I think the United States is going to side with, well, us and decide that those resources are better used fighting our war. I think this puts Ukraine into a weaker position and will probably bring forward peace talks and an agreement a lot quicker. I tend not to look at one specific thing and focus in on it. I kind of take a look at the rest of the world, what's going on, and how does this particular move affect a dozen other situations in the world. Maybe you should try to open your eyes and see a bigger picture on how this action affects other parts of the world and other things that Trump is trying to enact and wants.
series of them in Oman before the June bombings of last year. And the president put like I think it was a 60-day time constraint at the time. I don't think the Iranians thought he was serious. They thought that they would do what they have done for the past 47 years, but especially for the past several administrations, which is to drag out negotiations, to bluster, to get more time, and drag and drag and drag. And that's just not a negotiation tactic that is tenable for this president or his team.
And in terms of the questions that I get asked on the...
I'm going to pause this for a second. I apologize. I'm streaming and recording at the same time, and my dog just ran out on me. Be right back. Kona! Kona, come. Come. Kona, come.
When people come into the studio and they aren't supportive of the action in Iran, the big question they often ask is, what was the evidence that Iran had nuclear capabilities? What was the evidence that they were close to being able to create a weaponry that could affect the West significantly? Do you know what that evidence is?
It couldn't be the fact that they said they had a crap ton of 60% enriched uranium. God forbid that be the reason. And going from 60 to 90 is a lot faster than going from 0 to 60. Could be that.
Morgan.
I don't think you have to listen to the United States, the United Nations, or even the P3, the UK, France, Germany, that were all a part of this. We've all laid out documentation for years. I mean, you have nuclear watchdogs who are doing it, but forget all of that. Forget all of the international bodies in all the countries. The evidence is with the Iranian regime themselves. They openly bragged in the negotiations that they were at the 60% enrichment level. They've made it clear that their red line, that they are all actually both literally and figuratively willing to die on a hill for a nuclear weapon. So you don't need to believe me. You just need to believe the Iranian regime themselves.
And we already know that we're in the dark as far as where they're at technologically. Why wouldn't we be in the dark about how far along they are in enriching uranium? I mean, we saw this when they launched a missile at Diego Garcia, which is way further than we ever thought that their missiles could go, which shows us that there's things that we don't know. Our intelligence isn't flawless. You know, if it's that case with these missiles, what makes you believe that it's not that case with uranium? I mean, even them, they're bragging about it. Like, why wouldn't you just give that up and have a civilian nuclear program and get 5% and do your thing for your people? Because that's ultimately not what the Iranian government wants. The religious fundamentalists, they want to be able to dish out nuclear threats.
Isn't the challenge, though, for President Trump, and we're seeing this in the way that this is being played out by the media, and I know that the media is very rarely supportive of the president anyway, and this situation is no different, but we're seeing that actually the accusation that he didn't know what he was getting into, that he was forced into this situation by Israel, that there's no clear off-ramp. The criticisms are increasing as the clock is ticking to what was the deadline that he put in the sand of hopefully 4 to 6 weeks of action.
Listen, I think
it's tough streaming with your dog, especially when they don't have a shot collar, which I would never do to you.
if you look at President Trump and his record for decades, you could go back to the 90s when he was talking about the Iranian regime. You could also go back into his first term. While I've worked in the first year of his second term, in his first term as State Department spokesperson, we dealt with America leaving the JCPOA. That was the Iranian nuclear deal. We took on Qasem Soleimani. We took him out, obviously. And we also took on the maximum economic pressure campaign against Iran, in which we took their legitimate oil exports down to 460,000 barrels a day. I mean, it was de minimis compared to what it was whenever President Trump entered office. So I think it's
I mean, I don't think anyone should be surprised at this. It's not like an utter shock that this war happened. This conflict started. Donald Trump's been talking about Iran not getting a nuclear weapon for decades. Even in his prior administration, he took a bunch of actions against Iran. I don't think it's a surprise. I think it's kind of a letdown to some of the people that voted for him. I mean, I'm not super jazzed about this war in particular either.
Insulting not only of the president, but of his entire team for anyone that would insinuate that he doesn't know what he's getting into. This is the guy who took out Qasem Soleimani, the world's leading terrorist at the time. We have the best and brightest intelligence community, CIA, and military on the planet. We are unmatched. We have no peer when it comes to our intelligence strength and our military strength. And if anyone's willing to challenge us, be my guest. So far, no one on the world stage can do so, including this regime. So the president is briefed very detailed from, again, the best intelligence, the best military on the planet. He spent 4 years as president where he took on the Iranian regime and in that time took a lot of decisive action, both militarily and economically. We, of course, had the attacks last June. And let me just say, I want to make sure that the British people know this. The argument, when I hear someone say that Israel or Netanyahu got Trump into it, this is an anti-Semitic argument on its face. This is a trope for people to go after Israel, but it's most importantly a trope for people to go after the Jews. It's offensive and it's not tolerated.
I don't know what she means by trope. I think there's very real criticisms you could have of Israel. And the fact that they may have rushed us into this war, I don't think that they pulled us in without, with some coaxing. But I think that there's plenty to criticize about Israel and Bibi Netanyahu and the Likud party. I do think there's stuff to criticize about them. I don't think that if you don't like this war that you're anti-Semitic. That's ridiculous. I'm not a huge fan of this war. I recognize there's legitimate reasons for doing it, but I don't think Israel is the biggest reason we're there. At least I'd like to believe not.
In this administration by any means, and it's insulting.
There's nothing more important than keeping your money and your identity safe online. And with so many VPN options available, choosing the right one can be pretty daunting. But this video's sponsor, ExpressVPN, is making the choice easier for GB News viewers. ExpressVPN is offering up to 75% off, plus 4 extra months free. That's top-level security from just £2.49 a month, and you're covered by their 30-day money-back guarantee. So just click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code now. Remember, when you're online, you are often sharing personal data, so hackers can steal your information, your passwords, your photos, and your bank details in just seconds. But ExpressVPN encrypts your connection, making it virtually impossible for hackers to access your personal information. So why choose ExpressVPN? Well, it couldn't be easier to use. With just one click, you are protected. And ExpressVPN uses military-grade AES 256 encryption, which is the same standard trusted by the US government to guard their classified information. With their new tiered plans, you can protect up to 14 devices at once and manage passwords securely. Live chat support is available 24/7, and it typically connects you in under a minute with a real person. Click the link in this video's description or scan the QR code to get up to 75% off ExpressVPN, plus 4 months extra for free. Start protecting yourself today with ExpressVPN.
There we go.
In terms of the British people, we import half of our energy. We also import half of our food that we...
And you don't need to do that. That isn't something that you have to do. I mean, you have huge oil and gas deposits in the North Sea. You're just choosing not to, going along with this stupid Green New Deal, not understanding that all this stuff is made in China and the actual creation of these windmills and solar panels is just as bad as using fossil fuels. I mean, you have to use fossil fuels in order to make those things. And you're just giving your money to China. I mean, if you really want to make the world a better place, maybe even just make the solar panels and the windmills in your own country. But still, there's not enough evidence to prove that you're saving the earth by using those. In fact, there's evidence that you may be making things worse. Not that I'm against green energy. I'm all for finding new forms of energy. But show me the actual facts and data on how this is actually helping. And you have to think about how these things are created.
Consume. We're incredibly vulnerable to global shocks and inflationary shocks, which we're seeing at the moment because of the action in the Middle East. And obviously America isn't affected in the same way with the Strait of Hormuz being closed. Is there any bearing given in negotiations, do you think, to the impact of the actions in Iran on the UK?
Absolutely. And listen, I would say up until recently, I was working at the United Nations and working very closely with your British representatives in the Security Council. And the Brits, the Germans, the French, we all worked very closely together on Iran, on ensuring that the world knew exactly where their nuclear program was. We had a lot of diplomatic alternatives that we were working on last fall, including the snapback sanctions that no one thought we would be able to get at the UN. Together, the United States, with Britain and with France, were able to get those snapback sanctions in place at the UN. So I think that we have done really important work together. The United Kingdom is one of our closest friends and allies in the world. However, I would encourage you first to put the British people and to put your own economy first, the way we put America first. And what I mean by that...
That's a good point. I think the British, the Europeans, and the Canadians need to understand that we aren't taking the actions that we're taking in order to punish you. We're taking the actions we're taking to improve America's position and Americans. And I think, especially in Canada, and maybe even Britain, that they think for some reason Trump and our government's trying to punish them. No, they're just doing what's right for us for a change. And I think that if your government did the same thing, whether that's, especially in Canada and the UK, exploit your natural resources and lift your people up, but they choose not to. And it's time to start thinking about that instead of blaming the United States and Trump for your misfortune. Call out your government. Take action.
Is if you have an economy that is that important on oil and on trade from other countries, on food from other countries, well, you should be looking at exactly what we've done in the United States, was how do you bring this home? How do you release some of the undue environmental regulations and burden that prohibit you from being able to be more dependent on yourselves? You'll always have America. We export a lot of energy. We've got a lot of LNG. We've got a lot of gas, and we're certainly going to be willing to help our neighbor in the United Kingdom always. But another crucial point, so not only have we worked diplomatically together incredibly effectively at the United Nations, when you talk specifically about the Strait of Hormuz, I think what you're seeing, the actions that you've seen from CENTCOM, from the U.S. Navy over the past few days and weeks show that we care exactly what you just spoke about, which means that we have the U.S. Navy, the greatest Navy that the world has ever seen in the history of the planet, went through the Strait of Hormuz in what we call a freedom of navigation operation. We took the Iranian threats on directly. We didn't ask anybody else to do that freedom of navigation operation with it.
That's true. You know, the United States is responsible for keeping the trade and sea lanes open so that the world's economy keeps going, which is interesting to me because you'd think that our Navy's doing all this work. Why wouldn't we make money off of it? Why wouldn't we offer shipping insurance? Why would we not take advantage of all the work that our Navy does? Why is Lloyd's of London the chief insurer of oil tankers and tankers in general all over the world? Why are they bringing in trillions of dollars and we're not? It just kind of boggles the mind. It's like, how did we let that one slip through our fingers, especially because we're paying for the Navy and we're the ones keeping the sea lanes open? You'd think that naval insurance would be something we would offer. And I think that an interesting thing happened is, well, Lloyd's of London and Bank of England have decided to stop doing shipping insurance, even though they've never done it before, whether that was the Iraq War or Desert Storm or the conflict we had with the Iranian Navy where they were sinking ships and we destroyed half their Navy. They never stopped shipping insurance, not through any of those. In fact, it didn't even come close. Why are they stopping it now? And then why is Lloyd's of London going, oh, well, if Donald Trump offers you insurance, we'll never insure you again. So you make sure you don't take it, otherwise we'll destroy your business. I don't know. Maybe we're trying to benefit off of taking the insurance business from them. Something to think about.
We did it, so we're going to make sure that the rules-based international order that's in place after World War II, thanks to the American people, thanks to the American military, our U.S. Navy is going to make sure that stays in place. And it's not going to happen.
I would argue the opposite. I think our actions are changing the global structure of the post-war world permanently. I think that Donald Trump is guiding the world in a totally different direction. Instead of keeping what we have, letting basically the Bank of England and Davos and companies like Lloyd's of London to control and thrive off of, well, misfortune in the world and be able to, take advantage. I think that we're trying to get rid of that global structure in lieu of more nationalist interests and nations becoming nations again and not being one global blob that the elites control.
From 40 countries giving a statement about what they're going to do when the war is over. While the statements are nice and laudable, how you get freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz is through our freedom of navigation operations brought to you by the U.S. Navy and through the blockade that we are pursuing right now as well. So I think that the American president and that our American military, we're really putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to what you just talked about, ensuring that seas are free and open and fair so that you can trade and that you can get the vital food and oil and gas shipments that you need.
So when you talk about those countries which are sitting down in committee rooms and coming up with strongly worded statements.
Again, and another one of the knock-on effects is, well, you take out 1/5 of the world's oil and gas exports. Well, it had to be made up somewhere else. So who's benefiting from that? Russia. Russia is. And not too long ago, Russia said that they'd be accepting the US dollar in return for their oil and gas. Whether that's come to fruition, I don't know, but it's something to think about.
And writing plans of how to open the strait when the conflict has finished. Believe me, as British people, we are a little embarrassed sometimes by the approach of our Prime Minister, who seems to be very good at pushing a pen and not necessarily supporting what the people of the UK would see as our closest ally in America. But when
True. Americans feel very upset that our best friend since World War II and even in World War I, we stood shoulder to shoulder with you. It just feels kind of like you're throwing us under the bus, and it makes you wonder, what's different about this conflict? Why are they not standing by us? Is it because they're afraid of Islamic fundamentalism, or is it because they're afraid of their banking and insurance interests?
Starmer announced that he was bringing together these people to do this. What would the reaction be from inside the White House to that? Because it looks like it could also be...
Not that they really could, considering they couldn't send one ship to protect their base in Cyprus. The UK government, I think, just thought that their best friend, the big bad bully, the American people and the American military, was always going to be there. And now that we have a change in view, we're not, and I think they're panicking.
Thwarting the ambition of America to put pressure on the Iranians.
I'm not inside the White House right now, so I don't speak for them. When I saw...
Another tidbit from history. We were not always best of friends with the United Kingdom. In fact, when it came down to the Civil War, the UK and France supported the South. But one country in particular supported the North, and that was Russia. Just something to think about. Russia was one of the few countries that stood by us, and in fact sent their navy to protect our ports.
This statement, I'll tell you my reaction as a Trump one and to official from both administrations, and until recently working on the Middle East. Honestly, it was sort of a shrug of the shoulders, right? And it's nice that countries are thinking about what to do when the war is over, when we've done the tough work. And I think that's sort of the American consensus is like, okay, well, glad you're going to help when it's over. Don't worry, guys, we got it. I would say what's more important is that we've had a regime for 47 years that has terrorized its own people, that has terrorized.
In all honesty, we're not asking for much. We're asking for our allies to come with minesweepers. That's what we need help with. We don't need their destroyers, but we need help clearing out the mines to open up the sea lanes again. And it boggles my mind why they're refusing. It almost makes you wonder if they have ulterior motives, if they're not particularly happy that the Iranian government is being taken care of and there could be peace in the Middle East.
The Middle East. We're talking about a regime that hangs gay people. We're talking about a regime that murders teenage girls for the crime of showing their hair. We're talking about a regime that has terrorized its neighbors, that has turned.
Yeah, I think there's, in fact, indeed some of that happening in Iran. But at the same time, I don't think it's quite as bad as everyone would like you to believe. I mean, you can catch videos of especially the rich and affluent not wearing hijabs and being more westernized and free-spirited. I think it's more the fundamentalists and the poor that kind of suffer the consequences while their rich kind of get away with being more free.
Lebanon into a failed state, that turned Yemen into a failed state, that turned Iraq into a failed state, and will continue to wreak havoc in the region until finally, after 40.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think one of the biggest arguments for this is, one, it's a religious fundamentalist government that calls us the Great Satan, that's developing nuclear weapons, that sounds like they'd want to use it on us, is one. Another argument would be this is a country that slaughters their citizens, possibly in the tens of thousands, and not even by their own troops, by inviting in Islamic militias from Iraq to come in and do the dirty work for the regime, because it's a lot harder to get, Iranians to kill Iranians, but inviting in Iraqi militias to do the slaughtering of your citizens, that's more, stomachable, I suppose. The supporting of terrorist organizations all over the world, whether that's the Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, all this money going to these organizations and going towards their missile capability and their nuclear program instead of, well, how about power infrastructure so your people don't suffer blackouts all the time? How about water infrastructure so you're not running out of water, so your people have the right amount of water? How about infrastructure to put towards businesses and the ingenuity of your citizens? I think there's many reasons that you could argue to have this war. Not all of them being Israel, Israel, Israel. I think overall, this could be a very good thing. I mean, it may end up being a lot longer and a bloody mess, but I think you could make the argument for helping the people a lot more than you could for Iraq and Afghanistan.
47 years, the 47th president of the United States said enough is enough. It should have happened sooner, but the buck stops with him. And I'm incredibly proud as an American and as a former Trump administrator.
A lot of people are asking, why did he make the decision to go to war now instead of after the midterms, when it would be most politically advantageous for him to do it? Well, now was the time to do it, because they were rebuilding their stocks that got taken out, on the 12-day war, and they were at their weakest point, and they had a lot of manufacturing capability in creating drones and missiles, and they would become a lot stronger, and it would be a lot more difficult to do it later. So I think he made the decision to do it now and suffer the political consequences, and hopefully that doesn't ruin the chances of Trump and the Republicans keeping control of the House and Senate. But, maybe that's not the case. We'll see what happens. But there are cases to be made for this war. I can't say that I'm constantly the biggest fan of this war. I probably prefer that we not have done it. But there are definite reasons to argue for doing it.
Administration official that he made the decision to say, we're not going to let Iran turn into North Korea, because then it's too late.
Do you think it's accurate to say that when President Trump got into the White House, one of his longer-term ambitions for when he leaves the keys behind him and walks away one day is that there will be a different Middle East with the best chance of peace and therefore prosperity that we will have seen in our lifetimes, at least? Is that one of his greater ambitions? And sometimes that gets lost in the noise of Truth Social posts or China reacting to what's happening in Iran. Like, there's so much noise around. Is that part of the bigger picture?
I think you're absolutely right. That is the bigger picture. He wants to be a president of peace. He campaigned on being a president of peace. And Trump won.
Another interesting thing is bringing up China and Russia is, we're doing this. Why aren't they more aggressive? Maybe they benefit from this war in a way that most people don't think about. Just something to consider.
Well, we had the Abraham Accords, which happened around September, right before the election in 2020. I was a part of that small team, and we were so proud. I mean, this is work that diplomats do for a lifetime to get those sort of deals. And I will tell you that we are all eager to see Israel normalized in the Middle East. We're all eager to see Lebanon have peace with its neighbor finally, right? We're all eager to see Saudi and UAE and Qatar and all of these countries that are literally in the firing line, that are getting hit from Iran, to be able to pursue their oil energy exports.
You know, the interesting thing was, Trump did this Middle East tour and talked to all these leaders. I think, is it a possibility that he could have talked about doing something like this ahead of time? And even though they're not out and out saying, yes, this is a great thing, I think that a lot of these Middle Eastern Gulf states are going, yeah, this is a problem, and we're kind of happy you're doing this. Make sure you finish the job and not screw us over by, cutting bait and running. I think that to a degree the Gulf states are happy about this. They may not be out and out saying yay, but I think to a degree they are happy because it's been a threat to them as well.
To work with us economically, to invest. I think that the young people of the Middle East want to move forward. They want to have a brighter future. They don't want to be a region that's constantly in turmoil. But I can tell you that we didn't get Abraham Accords and Trump won. We didn't get to peace deals until we had the strength part first. So that involved, of course, the maximum economic pressure campaign against Iran. That also involved taking out Soleimani and making sure that our friends and our allies knew that we would stand with them. So Israel and the Gulf Arab states, there was no ambiguity in the Trump administration in either Trump 1 or Trump 2 for where we stand. And may I say, by the way, because I know I'm on a British outlet, that the British people have stood with us. I've been in Afghanistan, I've been in Iraq, I have stood side by side with British diplomats, with members of the British military, and we are incredibly grateful as Americans.
This is all true. We do love our British cousins across the pond. And we've stood by each other since World War II. And I think that's why it's so surprising that not only are you not standing next to us, you're refusing to let us use our bases. Why? Is there some kind of ulterior motive that they have there? It's just kind of interesting.
To always have the partnership. And so I know sometimes you talked about the prime minister, sometimes we may not love statements that I think sound a little bit like what we used to call hashtag diplomacy, that feel good, but that do nothing. However, I would say you have an absolutely fantastic ambassador, a British ambassador here in Washington, D.C., who is really on the front lines talking to the Trump administration every single day at the most senior levels. We feel that not only in Washington, D.C. with your ambassador, but also also at the United Nations with your team there. So the American and British partnership has continued, has persisted obviously for a long time, will continue. And I think that President Trump will get to that peaceful Middle East that you just spoke about. But again, peace only happens through strength. It's not a cliche. It's actually proven foreign policy that works.
And given that the issue of oil and the passage of fuel through the Straits of Hormuz and oil is so important to the British people, it makes such a difference to how expensive goods are in our country. Can you give our viewers any good news about how that price of oil per barrel might come down and when that might be? Just knowing the expertise, and I realise you're not minutely involved in these negotiations in any way, but just your experience of the Middle East, what kind of time scale are we looking at, do you think?
What I can promise the British people is that President Trump will not allow a terrorist regime, a theocratic revolutionary regime, to control the Strait of Hormuz. It's not going to happen. He's not going to allow that. And what will have to happen over time is the principle that we all fought together so closely in World War II to see that rules-based international order continue, to see freedom of navigation, freedom of operation in international waters. That is brought to you by the U.S. Navy and the British Navy and others working together, but honestly, principally by the U.S. Navy. And we are never going to allow, whether it's in the Middle East or whether it's in the Philippines near the Thomas Shoal, we're not.
I think that's true. I think what she's saying is true, except for the fact that I don't think we're trying to keep the world global order that happened after World War II going. I think we're trying to fundamentally change that now. And we'd like to see our British cousins stand by our shoulder again and have their politicians take the actions that make their people richer and have better lives. That goes for Canada and other European nations too. Maybe make the decisions that would be best for your people, not necessarily following an agenda that's been dragging you down and making you poor and making your lives, less prosperous. I don't know, something to think about.
Can allow anywhere in the world for anybody, especially a theocratic revolutionary terrorist regime, to control the waterways that are going to affect the United States and the United Kingdom. And we hope and pray that more of our allies will get in the fight with us. But even if we have to fight alone, we will fight and we will do the right thing.
Okay, Morgan Ortagus, thank you so much. Fascinating. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, that was interesting. All right, guys, till next time.